Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back with this week's episode of The Five Insider with myself, Joel Beya, and of course, Mr. David Ornstein. David, how you doing? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Joe. It's good to be back. Let's do it.
Good stuff. Really happy to have you back as well. Obviously, it's an interesting week in Europe and also the Premier League this coming weekend. And not too long to the World Cup as well, right? Are you excited?
I really am actually about the tournament in terms of the football.
Mhm.
It's suddenly almost upon us, and there's so many different storylines and things we weren't necessarily expecting. I think England would have wanted to be in better shape going into the tournament. Brazil on fire, France stuttering. It's going to be really interesting, but there's also the sort of other side to this World Cup, and it's no less important. It's probably more important than the football, and it's a lot of the build-up, a lot of the controversies, a lot of the issues surrounding this tournament that are going to be under the microscope while we're out in Qatar, and rightly so. And they're going to hopefully continue to be post-tournament as well. So it's not just that people shine a light on things like the migrant workers, the LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, and plenty more besides. It's all well and good shouting about it now, pre-tournament. And I think the Qatari authorities have taken some steps to try and address some of these issues. But I don't mean to use a cliche, but the proof will be in the pudding. Let's see what happens out there, and let's see what the legacy of this tournament is, because I don't think a major sporting event, and they all have issues around them leading up to them, has ever experienced as much scrutiny, controversy, conjecture, conversation as this tournament. And so that's a massive part of this. But in terms of see it for yourself and make your own judgments, I fly out there on, I think, the 17th of November, and I'll see with my own eyes what it's like, and I'll form judgments and hopefully cover it in a fair and right and balanced way, and also enjoy the football while not turning a blind eye to the other issues.
Of course. Very well said, David. I want to turn our attentions to Manchester United's game this coming weekend against Newcastle. Now, the reason why I want to talk about it is I want to give Newcastle massive credit, first of all.
Absolutely.
It's been like around a year, just over a year since they've been taken over. And my oh my, I would have not expected them to be so stable, especially Mr. Eddie Howe. When he was like at the realm of it, and I just thought, you know what, just get him out, get Unai Emery in or get whoever in. And they've done really well, to be fair to them.
Yeah, they have. I think it was the 7th of October, correct me if I'm wrong. And that's the day before my eldest son's birthday. So I remember that being wrecked by the Newcastle takeover, because I was sort of very much in work mode and tunnel vision, because it was such a big story. It had been so long in the making. I think 4 years, this group, Amanda Staveley-led consortium, which turned into the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Huge money, huge controversy, especially in the area, again, of human rights. And it finally came about. The Premier League had a piracy issue with Saudi Arabia that seemed to be resolved. Who knows if that was actually the bigger issue, the biggest stumbling block to this takeover. And that is a debate that will continue for many years to come. But in terms of what it did for the club, obviously Steve Bruce was moved on and Eddie Howe came in. He'd been out of the game for a little while, hadn't he? So there was a lot of question marks on Newcastle and their ambitious new owners' right to be appointing somebody whose last job was being relegated with Bournemouth. Many people seem to skirt over the amazing job he did there for so many years, bringing them up through the leagues and keeping them in the Premier League for a period of time, playing a really exciting style of football, and also, drawing links to bigger jobs at clubs and with the England national team as well. But I think he made an immediate impact, Eddie Howe, even if it wasn't necessarily in front of our eyes with results on the pitch. The atmosphere around the club was just transformed. Of course, that was partly because Mike Ashley had been replaced as owner, who wasn't popular there with majority of the fans. But also, they believed in Eddie Howe. He seemed a good fit in terms of his character, his acumen, his skills, his standing in the game, and where the Newcastle fans felt that he could take them. Then you hear behind the scenes as well. You speak to people at that club, around the game, people linked to Newcastle United, and they talk very highly of him and the way he said about it on the training field, in the dressing room, one-to-one and collectively with the players, starting to bring in members of staff, sports science, coaching, recruitment, and so on.
I just wanted to point out their key signings, David. Their January signings: Kieran Trippier for 13.5 million from Atletico Madrid. Excellent signing. You also had Chris Wood for 27 mil. I really raised my eyebrows at that one. You know, Guimaraes, who's been absolutely fantastic. I mean, 37.9 million from Lyon. Matt Taggart on loan. Key summer signings, of course, Matt Taggart again. Nick Pope. Steve Botman, Alexander Isaac as well, really young, exciting Swedish player. I mean, they've really invested and done a job. So I think I want to ask, do they have what it takes now to beat this current Manchester United side, where we're not quite sure if they've arrived yet or if there's still a long way for them to go?
Well, just quickly on those signings, I thought their recruitment was really strong in January. They got what they needed. It wasn't maybe what people were expecting in terms of being linked with Mbappe and Haaland and Neymar and Messi. But it was much more pragmatic, and Eddie Howe had a strong hand in that. I don't think he would have accepted those sorts of players. And fair play to the owners for giving him the authority. There was no director of football at the time, so it was really Eddie Howe leading that recruitment charge. And I think Kieran Trippier will come to define this era. He's a fantastic player and leader in that camp. And his performances, despite the injury that he had, have been top. Like, I have no doubt he'll go to the World Cup and possibly have a starting role, the way he's been playing in the Premier League. And then you're right, the likes of Dan Burn was very sensible, and he's established himself pretty well at his hometown club. You mentioned Matt Targett. That was the right player for that moment in time. They needed a left back. They then signed him permanently in the summer. Let's see what the future holds. I think they might still look to upgrade in a few areas. But then the sort of more glossy signings, what it seemed from the outside, like Bruno Guimaraes, but actually he's proved to be a complete revelation, not to the surprise of many who have seen him for in club football and also with Brazil, but just perfect. And he gets it, and his English is improving now. And then you step up again in the summer, but also not spectacular in terms of the biggest names in world football, but really clever signings. Like Sven Botman is going to be one of the best centre halves, I believe, in European football for club and country, the Netherlands. And then Isaac came a little bit out of the blue, but my goodness, you know, the clubs that have been looking at him, Arsenal were heavily linked with him, your club, just in January of last year. And Newcastle managed to get him. That was really well done. And it took many of us by surprise that it happened so efficiently. Maybe that speaks to their recruitment operation, which is developing, because Dan Ashworth is now in there as their director of football. They've got Darren Eales as the chief executive. He's vastly experienced in the Premier League. I saw a report by Craig Hope in the Daily Mail yesterday that Peter Silverstone is coming on board as the chief commercial officer. He was formerly at Arsenal. So bit by bit, Newcastle are building on and off the pitch. And the Saudi-led ownership do seem to be supporting the people on the ground here without necessarily interfering too much, which from a football perspective and a business perspective is a positive sign. But to your question about can they beat Man United? Well, Newcastle had a pretty difficult start to the season. They weren't producing many wins, even though the performance level was there, and they weren't losing many. But it's just clicked, hasn't it, in this last couple of weeks? I think maybe since the international break, which by no coincidence was a chance for Eddie Howe to get on the training ground and work with his players, those who weren't on international duty. And Eddie Howe is such a keen trainer. He loves to be on the grass and managing to have his impact in what is still a relatively new tenure for him. He's only been here, a year. And so when you look at the performance against Brentford and the result, of course, like spectacular. People hitting form at the right time. Callum Wilson coming back to fitness. And of course, I revealed in my Monday column a couple of weeks ago that he signed a new contract at Newcastle. So there's some stability there. You know, you've got John Joe Shelvey, who's coming back into fitness now after his injury problems. And he's a an important part of what Newcastle are trying to do. Joe Willock going from strength to strength. They seem to be clicking at a really important moment. And this is the biggest challenge really for Manchester United in a while. And of course, they had the Manchester derby not long ago. I'm not underestimating the size of that, but I think we all expected Manchester City on the trajectory they were on to win that on home soil as well, even though United had done well there in recent years. But at Old Trafford, it's the start of a run of, I think, in all competitions. Well, tonight, as we record this, they're playing at home against Ammonia. 6 of the next 7 or 5 of the next 6 of their games are all at home. And Newcastle present a really big test because they're in form. They come to Old Trafford where United are expected to dictate play, where United got results against Arsenal and Liverpool to turn around their early season struggles. Be in no doubt that Newcastle, the modern, the new Newcastle under this ownership and this manager, will come to Old Trafford expecting to challenge for at least 1 and possibly 3 points. They will want to win this, and they've got the quality to do so. And therefore, I think this is going to be a really telling test of this turnaround under Erik ten Hag for Manchester United. Is it for real? Or is it still embryonic and there are still some cracks there that need to be overcome? So I can't wait for this one. It's going to be an intriguing encounter.
David, now following Man United's 2-1 win against Everton, where Casemiro started and obviously Ronaldo came on for Martial and scored, do you think it's safe to say that Ronaldo and Casemiro are going to be in the Man United team for, I want to say the rest of the season, but that's not realistic, but at least for the time to come?
Well, they're in possession of the positions, so to speak, because Casemiro started, so that one appears to have swung in his direction. It would have taken, in my view, a bad performance for him to lose his place for the next game. And although there were some moments that he wouldn't have been so pleased with, losses of possession, mistake early on, etc., it's the sign of a top player how you recover from those mistakes. And even when he gave the ball away in midfield, was it for the Ronaldo goal? He then quickly robbed back Alex Iwobi of possession.
Exactly.
Played an incredible pass through.
That pass was absolutely sublime. I mean,
which is
it's funny. Sorry, David. I was saying we were on the Vibe with 5 show and I was giving him a hard time saying, what has he done? What has he done? Me and Steve were going at Rio and Jermaine Genius and then he goes and does that, top player,
that's it. He's a top player. This is a guy who's won it all at club level with Real Madrid. He's a seasoned Brazil international and he's one of their finest players. So it was a surprise to many of us that he wasn't in the team sooner, and maybe himself included. But Scott McTominay had been playing really well and deserved that role. However, now Casemiro's come in, I don't see him losing the starting berth for the time being. That will be really important for him ahead of the World Cup. It will be really important for Man United. They've invested so heavily in him, let's not forget. And he's at the age where he needs to be starting. He didn't come to Real Madrid to be a squad player. And Real Madrid wouldn't have been unhappy with that deal. He had done everything he could pretty much for them. And they got a huge amount of money for a player who's coming into the last major phase of his career. In terms of the Ronaldo one, that's a bit less predictable because he was on as a substitute for Anthony Martial, who's been in prolific goal-scoring form when he's played, but we know he's injury-prone. And so Ronaldo is top class, 700 club goals. It's mind-blowing, astonishing. But we saw with that finish and his influence, his body language seemed good as well. Maybe the summer is behind everybody now and they can start to look forward with unity and the quality that he provides, even at his age. It says to me that, things are coming together a little bit for United after what's been a roller coaster. It's been really rocky. And I don't want to preempt, Newcastle, it may be a negative result, but I do think that Casemiro and Ronaldo, whether it's starting all the games from here on to the end of the season, I don't know, and I doubt it, but they're going to be crucial parts of what Erik ten Hag is trying to do. No doubt there'll be speculation around Ronaldo again in January. But if he's playing matches and if United are doing well, you tend to see these things be a little bit quieter than if they're not.
David, there's a player that I want us to pay attention to. He was on Man United's radar, Cody Gakpo, now Dutch that plays for PSV. So far this season, 9 matches, 9 goals, 9 assists. Very quickly, is he still in Man United's plans come the January transfer window?
It's interesting because it wasn't just a rumour. Cody Gakpo was a credible target for Manchester United, but they were weighing up whether to go for Antony, whether to go for Gakpo, whether to go for both of them. They ended up spending more than they probably would have liked to on Antony, and therefore Gakpo slipped off the agenda. He was still the subject to tons of interest from the likes of Leeds United on deadline day, of Southampton, and others too. There is huge admiration for Cody Gakpo around the game. His form has gone from strength to strength since the transfer window shut. It was quite dramatic. I think Leeds had a private jet ready to fly back with him from Eindhoven to Yorkshire, and it never happened. I revealed in my Monday column that contrary to some reports that have been around in recent days, that Cody Gakpo to Leeds is a move that is not going to be happening as things stand. The context to this is that Leeds, once the window shut and they didn't manage to get that deal over the line, continued negotiations with PSV, with Gakpo, and it was felt among some around the deal that this was actually going to possibly come to fruition for a January move. I think the clubs got close to an agreement just recently. But then he went on international duty. He scored another goal. He's one of the most productive attackers in Europe this season, statistically. And I think with the World Cup looming, his expectations have started to shift somewhat. And I think right now he's targeting a move to a Champions League club, one of the biggest clubs in the world. I've heard Real Madrid mentioned by sources with knowledge of his sort of situation. And we know of Manchester United's prior interest. I don't know if that's going to continue in January and beyond now that United got Antony in, and you've got Rashford playing well, Martial playing well when fit, Jadon Sancho in the mix as well. And so we'll have to do some more work on that. But certainly this is a player who we need to pay attention to as this transfer window approaches, because PSV Eindhoven, we're told, need to raise money. He's the obvious solution to that. Even though he signed a new contract, I think there was an understanding that if the right offer arrives, then they would not stand in his way. But what this will hinge on is the World Cup, largely, because if he performs well, then his expectations are only going to climb. If he doesn't, or the Netherlands don't do so well, maybe the market is not as spectacular as he might have expected. And then maybe somebody like Leeds come back into the equation, because they definitely retain the interest in him, even though they've been informed that he's not going to be joining as we speak now. That's not his plan. In terms of Manchester United, I don't have any firm information on that, but certainly their pursuit of him and the consideration they gave to him was real. And that makes you think that he's always going to be relatively high in their thinking.
Thank you for that information. Now, I want to move it on to the upcoming game this weekend, Liverpool versus Man City. I'll tell you what I realized is that it's a much bigger game, obviously, in the north than it is in the south. But it's because we're usually focused on Arsenal, Arsenal, Tottenham, or Man United, Arsenal, or whatever it is. But this game is really becoming an extremely, extremely important game because of obviously the positions that these two teams have had within the last 5 years or so. Where do you see this going? I know you're more of a journalist and stuff like that, but where do you see this going in terms of result? Who would you favor at the moment? The obvious choice is to say Man City because of how they've been playing, but Liverpool were in, dangerous form against Rangers yesterday, 7-1. This could be the time for them.
Joel, I sit on the fence, and so I've been used to being an impartial journalist, so giving my opinion's tough, and I'll always be wrong, but I'll give it a go. And just on your point about the rivalries, we had Arsenal, Man United in the Premier League for years, and Chelsea came onto the scene, and it was a bit of Chelsea, Man United, Chelsea, Arsenal, and just recently Liverpool and Man City have really gone hammer and tong, and it's been fantastic. And I live up here in the northwest, so we're at opposite ends of the country. And you really feel that intensity around these fixtures, which is why Sunday's such a thrilling prospect. largely because Man City are on fire domestically, certainly, that I know they drew in midweek with Erling Haaland on the bench. And that's a crucial point to make, because when Erling Haaland's in the team and you think he's going to be primed for Anfield now, then anything City create, he's got a good chance of scoring. And Liverpool haven't been defending so well this season. If somehow you can get a hold of him as Liverpool's defence, and it'll be a massive test for Virgil van Dijk, especially with Joel Matip out injured. Konate came into the side against Rangers, and it will be a big examination for him. That provides them with the physicality they need, but can they stop Erling Haaland from a technical perspective? Let's see. And the atmosphere will play a huge part in this as well, because we've seen Manchester City themselves go to Anfield in Premier League and Champions League matches in recent years, and it changes so much. It can conquer even the biggest and strongest of teams and mentalities. And despite Liverpool's troubled start to the season, they hit form at Rangers in the Champions League. You might say that, you know, Rangers played poorly and they've not been in good form. And the Scottish League is not at the level of the Premier League at the moment. But that Ibrox atmosphere, they took the lead. Everything around Liverpool at the moment, and they could have wilted there, but actually they rose up, and they didn't just rise up. They put on a spectacular show of defensive solidity, but attacking flair. And when Mo Salah hits form, really for the first time this season and since signing his new contract, with the fastest hat-trick in Champions League history, you take your hat off to him. Roberto Firmino has quietly been in sensational form this season.
I think he's their most important player, you know. I think he's going to play himself into a new contract.
Well, that's a possibility, because he's out of contract in 2023. He was the one that no one really talked about when Salah and Mane were coming towards the end of their deals. Well, so is he. And he got back into the team when Darwin Núñez had a red card in his home debut. And he's worked his way into really good form. He scored a brilliant goal at the Emirates Stadium at the weekend, did fantastically well again at Rangers. He seems the link player of all link players, and we've been reminded of that just recently. And maybe he's even playing Salah back into form and linking with the likes of Harvey Elliott and Diogo Jota. And it's a shame that Luis Diaz is now injured. But actually, Darwin Núñez, who was meant to be the lead striker, and had his red card and then injury issues, well, actually, he's hit form, because very impressed with him against Arsenal and again last night against Rangers. So maybe they're coming to the boil just at the right time for this fixture. However, Manchester City are flying in the Premier League. Do
you know what I wanted to do, though, David?
It's going to cancel itself out, isn't it, Joel? It's going to be a draw.
So their last 5 results, David, go as follows. So 4-1 Man City, 2-2 draw, 2-2 draw, 3-2 Liverpool, 3-1 Man City. So despite Liverpool's form, you still got to ask the questions, right? Because for me, I almost think form goes out the window because the rivalry is so great now. You know, as Jamie Carragher tried to point out, he thinks it's the biggest rivalry in football history, or whatever he said. But I really do agree that it's up there at the moment. I was trying to get tickets for a family member, and obviously I went through the sites and stuff. Everything just sold out. It's just sold out immediately.
It's the hottest ticket in town, isn't it?
It is. It really
it's going to be crazy, and the noise will be insane, and the on-field friction and quality is all going to be there. The touchline as well, no doubt, and that's why we can't wait for it. You say the form goes out the window. It does to an extent, and if it didn't, Man City would be the firm favourites for this, based on sort of track record this season. But Liverpool can raise themselves, and that's why I'm going to be really boring and say they're going to play out a score draw. It could be quite high scoring, given the defensive frailties and the attacking prowess. You want to see like a 3-3 draw or something. When it's 0-0 or one of the teams win handsomely, just replay this clip and embarrass me.
Okay, so David, Leeds versus Arsenal this coming weekend. I'm a very relieved man after last week's performance. I'm really, really, really impressed with my team. But is Gabriel Jesus injured? Because he was subbed off in the second half versus Liverpool during the 3-2 victory. Is there something that we should be worrying about here?
Yeah, saw that. He was quite uncomfortable, wasn't he, by the looks of it? But this rest he's going to get in the Europa League when Arsenal face Bodo Glimt will serve him well. I think Mikel Arteta was asked about it and suggested that he's fine. I think one of our colleagues, Simon Collins, in the Evening Standard, wrote that Gabriel Jesus is fine and that he's being rested for this game. So I would imagine that he'll be starting at Elland Road on Sunday. He's a very durable player. He doesn't get tons of injuries, Gabriel Jesus, and he goes into some pretty meaty challenges. We saw him get wiped out by Alisson, and also he's a very impressive physical presence now. His body's in great shape. He's at a fantastic age, and really hope he goes to the World Cup, by the way, and I expect him to, but Brazil have got such amazing options that is one to watch, of course. And the way he's been leading Arsenal's line this season is transformational. I did say, hopefully on this programme, but many others as well, Gabriel Jesus is going to be one of the signings of this season and many years to come in the Premier League. He was absolutely perfect for what Arsenal needed. It was outstanding value for money, but it suited all parties. Manchester City have got Erling Haaland in, and they're not going to be complaining about it. But really seismic for Arsenal, what he does on the pitch, but also for the chemistry of that group when you see him leading the conversation in the huddle pre-match. And not only words, but actions. He's leading by example. His goals, his assists, the trouble he causes for even the best of defenders. And that is something that Leeds might be having nightmares about. They're not in the best form, of course. They tripped at Crystal Palace. They had started the season really well, Leeds, and I was impressed by how well the new signings had hit the ground running. Jesse Marsch confounding a few critics after that sort of relegation scrap that he saved them from last season. At Crystal Palace last weekend, I think they had 4 of their new signings on the pitch and a couple more on the bench. That's a lot of change, and it has blended quite well, but just hit the buffers a little bit in recent weeks. And in that region of the table, you're only a couple of points ever away from being in a bit of a scrap. So I think Arsenal go there with big confidence. But Elland Road on a Sunday afternoon, big atmosphere, Arsenal in town. It's going to be a feisty battle. And I think Arsenal, back to your question, will really hope Gabriel Jesus is fit and raring to go for a crucial game. That, of course, they all are now, especially because of the World Cup looming. If Arsenal can keep themselves top of the Premier League, especially on the same day that Manchester City go to Liverpool, they could drop points. Then this could be a really intriguing period for Arsenal, who, because of their rearranged fixture against Manchester City, owing to the PSV Eindhoven Europa League game that got postponed because of the Queen's death, they only played Chelsea among the so-called biggest clubs before that World Cup break. And I think it would be a huge boost to Mikel Arteta, to the squad, to the club, and to their chances this season if they go into that World Cup break with themselves in top or second position, really in that mix towards the top of the table.
Really quickly, David, I want to focus on a player that's been on fire. He really has for Chelsea this season. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. Now, there was a leaked video that came out in regards to him talking about Mikel Arteta, who, the fact that he didn't like big characters or big players and he couldn't deal with it, What were your thoughts when you saw that video, and also Mikel Arteta's response when they asked him about it in a press conference?
Disappointed, Joel, that it came out. That it was recorded, because clearly he didn't know about that and wouldn't have given his blessing to it. And listen, we should treat people with respect rather than filming and recording them surreptitiously. And this isn't some sort of big scandal. It was a comment that by broadcasting it, you're just trying to create controversy. And I don't know the origins of it, but it was disappointing. In terms of the actual nature of it, look, we're all grown men and women here. We know that it didn't end well for Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at Arsenal. Mikel Arteta was unhappy with his conduct. Arsenal released a statement when they stripped him of the captaincy. saying that, his latest disciplinary issue or something, suggesting there had been too many. We've seen him feature heavily in the All or Nothing Amazon Prime series, and that whole incident and saga of what was going on at the time, and clearly what he was perceived by Arsenal to have been doing in terms of, I don't know, being late and things like that, didn't fit in their mind with Mikel Arteta's non-negotiables and the way that Arsenal and Arteta are trying to take this club. And the direction they seem to be going is really positive, and that squad atmosphere seems better than ever before, and the fan base seems happier than ever before. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang found a good solution in Barcelona, and he played a major role in qualifying them for the Champions League, which, when Arsenal didn't, obviously struggling for goals in the process, didn't reflect too well on that decision and his move. But you've always got to understand there's many things going on behind the scenes and under the surface. It's not just as simple as, why didn't you keep him and play him? He wasn't playing. It didn't look like he was going to get back in the team. He was training alone. He wouldn't have been happy with that. Arsenal wouldn't have been happy with him being there in those circumstances. It felt to those of us who were reporting on that story at the time that the bridge had been burned and there was no way back. It wasn't possible to rebuild it. So the best was made of a bad situation for all parties in cutting ties. But no sooner had Barca qualified with his help for the Champions League, then they bring in Robert Lewandowski, world-class striker in his own right. And it was clear that the role for Aubameyang would be limited, despite what Xavi was saying about counting on him. Chelsea were interested, understandably so. They needed a striker who could score goals, was proven at doing so, and can do so at the highest level. It was like a domino effect. Yeah. Chelsea eventually moved very late in the window, but those talks have been going on for a few weeks. He comes in, he hits the ground running, even with his broken jaw. No surprise that he's been scoring goals, because he's done so everywhere he's been. His body's in great shape. Even though he's getting older now, he plays like he's younger, and he's still got
years left.
Yeah, he's still got fuel in the tank. And Chelsea got a contract for him that they wanted. And although they'll still be looking at strikers for the windows going forward and at every position, to be honest, when he's delivering in those big games, in Champions League encounters, they'll be absolutely delighted. Mikel Arteta handled the situation well by saying, everybody's entitled to their opinions, and just leaving it there. He wasn't going to be dragged into a debate. It seems that these comments were made at the time of Aubameyang's departure, according to his post on social media, when emotions were raw. There was a lot going on, and people say things. Clearly, it wasn't the best relationship by the end, especially because it was so strong when Aubameyang captained Arsenal, scored the winning goals in the run to the FA Cup trophy in summer 2020, behind closed doors, was rewarded with a new contract that Mikel Arteta endorsed. And so the fracture that what happened after that caused would not have left relations on the best of terms. I don't know if they spoke afterwards, probably doubt it, but I'm not one to know the exact details of that. And I just think it was a little bit unsavoury, but we should all be mature enough to say it's done and dusted now. Arsenal are doing well, Aubameyang's doing well, and on we go.
Yeah, he's wished us luck. He said, just not on November the 6th. I don't know if you saw that, but that kind of hurt me a bit.
It scratched at a wound, right?
David, thank you very, very much for your stats and the information. The insider himself. You know what? I'm looking forward to chatting next week. We can discuss the results, of course, Champions League, Europa, everything. But yeah, I want you guys watching to make sure you read David Ornstein's column. Massive shout out to The Athletic as well. Absolutely fantastic. On Mondays, we try to make reference to your column on this show because I think it's a must read. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe. We will be back soon. And also follow David on his socials. The links are in the description. Absolutely fantastic news. You can hear him at any time over socials, and we will be back soon. Joel Beya, David Ornstein, signing out. Peace.
When you talk about greatness and you talk about in tennis, Roger Federer and Nadal, they're the best. It's an era. Never be done again. When you talk about like Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. I just talk about them. I have been lucky and blessed and privileged to share the pitch with both of them